Victor, what was your involvement with the bids, with the concept, and what can we expect from the World Cup in the United States? Please.
United States, Canada, and Mexico. So let's start there first, because that is actually that's the biggest part of the story. So the U.S. had bid for a previous World Cup, this one here, and obviously had not been successful. And the planning for 26 as a united bid was actually conceived in 2011. Yeah, at a restaurant in Vancouver, between 3 Canadians, who said that it was time to bid for the Men's World Cup, because we had just won the Women's World Cup bid for 2015 that we hosted in Canada. And so we decided, at that time it was 32 teams, like here. It wasn't 48 yet. And what we decided to do was we figured that maybe the concept of hosting it with another nation, it'd only be done once, but the bid wasn't actually a united bid. What happened was with Japan and Korea in 2002, they had separate bids, and FIFA had decided to put them together in the last minute. So they didn't actually bid for the World Cup together. But we just thought it would be a very Canadian thing to do, to host with other countries. So we approached our friends in the US, who actually said no in the beginning. Yeah. For those of you that already know me, I'm not a very politically correct guy. I just like to tell you how it is. The Mexicans said yes, of course. And so it took us about a year to convince the Americans that you're better off having 75% of the World Cup, like a very good chance of getting it, than having 0% chance of getting the World Cup, as you have already experienced. And they finally convinced them, and so we launched the bid in 2017 as a united bid. I guess using a different football that we're used to in the Americas. I guess you could say I was the quarterback of the bid. But it was really led in terms of the running back who actually did a lot of the legwork was a guy by the name of Carlos Cordero, who was the U.S. president at the time, who did a lot of the legwork along with the other 2 presidents. But Carlos, I have to take my hat off to him, did a lot of the legwork. So that was sort of our strategy. And obviously we won the bid in 2018 in Moscow, just before the last World Cup. And we've been slowly working on things the last 4 years, and obviously on December 19th of this year, right after the final here, it'll turn all the attention will turn to our 3 host nations.
Wow, it's an amazing story. Why did the US say no when you asked first?
It's the US, I guess. I can say that as an honest Canadian and a good neighbor. Some of you can't say that, or else you'll get into some diplomatic problems. But us as Canadians, we're okay with that. It's just, you know, I can understand that from being a nation that has the capabilities of doing it. Obviously, let's be honest. If the U.S. wanted to, could probably host the World Cup in the state of California. If they really wanted to, they have the facilities. Let's be honest. But the reality of a united bid, and I've said this already, I think this probably will be the last World Cup hosted by one nation, just because it's the reality. I think moving forward, not only from an economic standpoint, but also I think is just the right thing to do. I think in football is to share knowledge, as you guys are doing here, to share ideas, but also to share the wealth. And I think now, as you've seen with 2030, every bid is a joint bid. And I think you'll see that moving forward, because it's just a better way to do it, to share something with your neighbor, to both emotionally profit from it, forget about the money part, and to really raise the bar in terms of the development of football around the world. I think it's a better way to do things. And so I think this will be probably the last World Cup you see by one nation.
Definitely. And as we can see in Qatar, they are using the logo, football unites the world. So it's uniting from the very beginning of the bid. That's a good message too. But you mentioned knowledge transfer, knowledge sharing. And the United States has the top universities in the world. And also another course at Ohio is dividing with the FIFA Master #1 in the world ranking of sport business. What is the plan for building up on the knowledge of the building of the World Cup? I mean, is there a series of conferences already planned, or can we help as a FIFA Master alumni to organize not only a conference during the World Cup in 2026, but a series of conferences from now on, so that we can start discussing how the World Cup can serve better not only the US, Mexico, and Canada, but the whole world? I just thought about that as you were mentioning knowledge here. I mean, do you think we could help as FIFA Master alumni in any way towards the World Cup 2026?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the beauty of it. The runway is a little shorter than normal because it's 3.5 years, not 4. But I think we have the opportunity to, as you rightly said, not only being through the infrastructure of education in all 3 countries, but even in the football infrastructure of all 3 countries, to receive and exchange knowledge. And I think I'm not aware of the exact details, but I know that there'll be plans in place to have conferences, not just the A conference, throughout. There's a lot of touch points as well over the next 3.5 years with other events, whether it be confederation events that we have, like Gold Cups and Nations League and our women's championships and all that. I think there's a lot of touch points along the way where this sort of types of event would be very, very advantageous for the sport and for all our stakeholders. And obviously, leaning on the FIFA Masters program, I think it would be obviously a smart thing to do to have that.
You can count on us. Mauro Silva, you played the World Cup in the United States. What can you tell us about it? Because people sometimes don't realize how important football or soccer, if you like, is in the United States. And you played there, you were a champion there. How could you express the feeling of playing football in the United States during a World Cup?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me be here today and participate in this important conference. Pedro, congratulations, and João, congratulations for this event. Thank you for the invitation. I prefer answer the questions in Portuguese or Spanish because my English is not very good, Pedro. I'm sorry, translate for me, please. Pedro, a lembrança que eu tenho dos Estados Unidos da Copa do Mundo foi maravilhosa, né? Da infraestrutura dos times de ganhar a Copa do Mundo. Os Estados Unidos é um país importante para o desenvolvimento do futebol. Eu acho que a Copa do Mundo voltar para os Estados Unidos é bem importante no sentido de você desenvolver o futebol masculino dentro dos Estados Unidos e também trabalhar nesse aspecto de capacitação de profissionais, desenvolvimento de infraestrutura. Eu acho que esse é um aspecto bem importante que a Copa do Mundo ela sempre leva para os países, né? E principalmente essa questão de desenvolver e fortalecer o futebol americano no cenário internacional. Eu acho que seria fundamental para o futebol, ganharia muito com essa participação, esse desenvolvimento dos Estados Unidos e esse crescimento da indústria do futebol nos Estados Unidos.
Vitor, you understood everything in Portuguese, right? Yeah.
No, but it's your natural language. You said in Italian or Spanish.
No, he said it was wonderful to have played the World Cup in the United States. They have the best infrastructure in the world. The biggest market, so it was wonderful being there and contributing to American soccer to blossom through the World Cup. Which leads me to my next question, which is, back in 1994, right?
Yeah.
It was basically the beginning of MLS, which is now a strong league. Would we look at the joint World Cup in 2026 as a milestone for something bigger to unite even more countries in that fashion? Because when we look at the global space for football, what we feel, and I can tell you as a Brazilian one, is a one-way globalization. So only European clubs, they have markets everywhere in the world. I take the example of Flamengo playing here in Doha, the last club championship, against Liverpool. Flamengo has 40 million of supporters. One of them, Cadu, is here. Only in Brazil, 40 million supporters in Brazil. Liverpool, 150 million supporters, 5 million in the UK, and over 100 around the world. So we do not have a global competition to face clubs playing the Champions League. What if we had a continental competition from Canada to Chile, from the World Cup 2026, marking a new era in football around the world, where clubs can really be, where football can be truly global, right, Jay? So what do you think?
So a little story before I answer your question. So in 1990, I had retired the year before, and so through injury, so I was a guest in 1994 of our head coach at the time for the Canadian national team. And I was on the bench in the game that he played in Edmonton. You remember the score of that game when you played Canada before the World Cup?
Yeah,
Yeah, what was the score?
Toronto, no?
You played in Edmonton, and you played Canada before the World Cup.
Yeah,
1-1.
1-1, Toronto.
They tied Canada 1-1. And it was a great story. Wow, I had just retired. If I wasn't retired, maybe, but probably not actually. But I was on the bench. And because the coach was a dear friend, and he said, listen, in honor of your, come and sit. So I sat, so I saw him play. So it was really good. Obviously, they were playing Canada. We weren't as good as we are now, who came to the World Cup. But we were decent, and Brazil was favored. And they were a tune-up. And before the game, everybody's warming up. Brazil loose, and obviously probably going to smash Canada by 4 or 5. It didn't happen. And at the beginning of the game, our captain was a guy named Colin Miller, who had played in Scotland. Great guy, funny guy. And he goes up to Dunga, and he says, Camisa, after the game, I'm captain, you're captain. Dunga says, yeah, no problem. So we tie 1-1. Brazil's not happy because last game before preparation, you tie a country like Canada, you're the favorite to win the World Cup. So Colin goes up to Dunga and says, hey, Camisa, like we talked. Dunga goes, fuck you.
No more chance.
Yeah, Colin Miller says, that's the last chance you get to ever having a Colin Miller jersey. So that's a funny story. So yeah, and then you won the World Cup. So there you go.
I remember.
Yes. Yeah.
I played.
But yeah, no. Listen, I think the impetus, and I think the impetus of having a Club World Cup that's expanded, that FIFA has. It's already been an agreement by all the confederations and the FIFA Council that there will be an expanded Club World Cup starting in 2025. And the whole impetus of that is not just because it's a competition and all that. It's really the premise of increasing, club football throughout the world. Right now, the base of the power of club football is in Europe for obvious reasons. But that power and the base of that power is really, if you look at it, it's only European in geographical terms, not in terms of assets. The assets are, the players come from all over the world, South Americans, Africans, Asians, North Americans, coaches come from all over the world, and even now ownership groups. All right, so 13 or 14 out of the 20 EPL owners are American. So as you can see, it's a it's a really it's the globalization of the game. That now needs to spread throughout the game, throughout the world, not just concentrated in one region of the world. And I think that's sort of the next evolution of club football. One of the best ways to do it is through competitions, whether it's at the FIFA level or confederation level, to raise the bar. There's also, I know, investment in obviously our part of the world. Also, I know in South America. I know a lot of Brazilian clubs are now being, there's a lot of equity being put into Brazilian clubs by mainly US money. And so that, I think, will lead to sort of the improvement of club football from an infrastructure standpoint, professionalization standpoint, and obviously from a development standpoint. And so I think it's very important that, you know, at the end of the day, as we see here with the World Cup and the great fans from all over the world, the game is global. Yes, you have, you know, beautiful football played by countries like Brazil, and you have your favorites and your powerhouses like in any sport. But this is really a global game, and I think from a FIFA perspective, and also from a confederation perspective, it's our fiduciary duty to ensure that there is a redistribution of wealth. And what I mean by wealth is not just money. I mean the redistribution of knowledge, wealth, all that is done on a global level. Because at the end of the day, the young boy and the young girl, whether they're standing in Zimbabwe or standing in Germany, deserves the same opportunity, the same right to have those aspirations and those dreams. And so that's our job and your job as you move on into your careers, and ensuring that we keep pushing the envelope on ensuring that globalization is done in a very responsible manner.
Wow, very inspirational, because it's true. We, as a professional in football, should be looking at it, not just in small parts of the business. Mauro Silva is now the Vice President of the Football Federation of São Paulo. And for some of those of you that do not know São Paulo is bigger than Argentina in GDP, population, and almost size. But GDP for sure, and size, and population too. Why? Because Jair Bertoni is Argentina in the room. By the way, Argentina played in this stadium the last match, the previous match. Congratulations, yeah. Anyway, Mauro, you played for La Coruña for many years. You had to go to Europe to keep playing at the highest level. And now you are running a football federation in São Paulo with the challenge of increasing the power of the clubs to keep and form more players there. And by the way, Vitor, when you mention the global stage of the World Cup, we can see with Brazil so many people who are not Brazilians cheering for Brazil. But that's only with the national team. Our clubs, they cannot cross the barriers of Brazil because we don't have really a continental competition to face the Champions League that Mauro Silva played. So, Mauro, you played there. You are an idol in La Coruña, and now you have the responsibility of doing something for a state federation in Brazil. What do you do? What is your plan?
Pedro, translate me, please. Eu acredito muito que o importante é o desenvolvimento da indústria do futebol no Brasil, da mesma forma que aconteceu na Europa. A profissionalização, a qualificação de todos os profissionais. E eu sempre digo, Pedro, isso muitas vezes, que o Brasil ganhou 5 Copas do Mundo porque nós éramos muito bons dentro de campo. Fora de campo, na administração, na transparência, na governança, a gente tem um caminho para melhorar. Então, agora, se a gente melhora a gestão, melhora a formação, capacita os profissionais, que foi o que a Liga Espanhola fez, a Premier League fez, entendeu, Pedro? O futebol brasileiro tem um potencial muito grande por ser um país continental.
Wow. First, Brazil has won 5 times the World Cup because Brazil is good on the pitch. Outside of the pitch, we have a long way to improve the management of football. And then between brackets, imagine if we were good off the pitch. So, just imagining. Anyway, he also said that Brazil has a huge potential. If we get professionalized as the Premier League, as La Liga, and by the way, you mentioned, Vitor, the investment coming in Brazil now. So we are very late if we look at. I mean, we don't have a professional league yet. The clubs are discussing this in Brazil now. We now are receiving these investments of people buying clubs. So Mauro said, once it happens, Brazil might unlock its potential. And by the way, I just remember that the last World Cup in our continent was in Brazil, 2014. So maybe it's a good opportunity to increase this relationship so that Brazil can somehow help with some knowledge and experience from the World Cup. Just so you know, working here in Qatar, there are 350 professionals from the Brazil World Cup 2014, including the deputy CEO of the World Cup, who was here with us this morning and helped securing this venue. So you can look at Brazil as a good partner, not only for the World Cup, but for developing football worldwide. How do you see us in the future working towards this World Cup together, having in mind that we can develop football worldwide from the World Cup in the United States? As you create United States, Mexico, and Canada. I will not make this mistake again.
So in terms of working with whom, though?
Well, first, working with the experience of the previous World Cup in Brazil. Yeah. So how Brazil could be helpful somehow in order to transfer this knowledge and experience.
Yeah, no, I think if you see a lot of international events, not just World Cups, but Olympics is this way, there's always this transfer of knowledge, right? Yes, it's different markets, different realities from a Brazil to a Russia to a Qatar, and now with us, no doubt about it. But in terms of delivery, in terms of some of the more technical areas, I think those are valuable lessons that can be transferred. So I think for sure, there's value in sort of tapping into those resources that people experience back in Brazil, because I also know that those same people also transferred over to Russia and also here as well. So there is valuable assets there to tap into for sure.
Wonderful. We are approaching the end of our panel. I would like to ask if someone at the audience would have any question. It's a unique opportunity. Sika, he's a lawyer actually he's the CEO of the group of clubs trying to form a league in Brazil. Yeah, interim CEO. But that's the only we have right now. Please.
Thanks. Hello. Good evening. Good afternoon, sorry. I'm kind of lost here. All right, Pedro, yes, I'm actually a lawyer just like Pedro. It's really nice to have you.
I won't hold it against you, don't worry about it.
It's really nice having you here, Victor. It's really a pleasure to meet you. And Mauro Silva, you're a great friend, and it's always an honor to be with you, okay? My question goes for Mauro, but possibly for Victor, actually. Mauro is the probable next president of the Paulista Federation, of the São Paulo State Federation. And at the same time, we are building up a league. And by building up this league, we're going to possible move our football from one level to the next one. Actually, we can triple our revenues. If we do that, a club like Fortaleza, which is like the 10th club of Brazil in terms of power, can have more money than Boca Juniors. So, and I'll ask Mauro, do you think that our next challengers would be the Americans and Canadian clubs due to this change of actually the management of Brazilian football and the changing of revenues of Brazilian football after the building up of the league? Quer que eu fale em português, Mauro? Basicamente o seguinte, você é o próximo presidente da Federação Paulista, provável. E ao mesmo tempo a gente está fazendo uma nova liga que tenha uma tendência a duplicar, triplicar as nossas receitas. E um clube como o Fortaleza pode ter mais receita que o próprio Boca Juniors. A minha pergunta é que se você acha que no futuro os nossos competidores serão os americanos, os canadenses, ao invés dos sul-americanos.
Bom, Sica, depois o Pedro traduz aí, por favor. Eu acho que é um assunto que tem que ser trabalhado. A gente vê no Brasil, hoje na América do Sul, o futebol brasileiro ele crescendo muito e gerando muito mais receita do que os outros países sul-americanos, né? Então, eu acredito que a importância da gente tentar trabalhar em conjunto, né, no caso aí a Conmebol, para fortalecer o continente como um todo, porque senão você realmente corre esse risco, né, de o Brasil com a Liga, como você disse, aumentando muito as receitas e cada vez esse abismo crescendo com relação aos nossos países vizinhos, né, sul-americanos. Eu gosto muito, quando fala de futebol, quando você tem uma visão sistêmica, de trabalhar em conjunto, de unir forças, né, para você desenvolver o futebol sul-americano, trabalhar em conjunto com a CONCACAF, com a UEFA, com a FIFA. Eu gosto muito porque eu acho que fortalece muito o todo, né, essa união, e de você ter essa visão sistêmica, esse diagnóstico para você conseguir fortalecer o futebol como um todo, porque senão você vai criando esses abismos e essas diferenças, né, apesar da dificuldade desse ponto com relação às economias dos países também, né, Pedro? Não sei se eu consegui te responder, Pedro, para você captar aí e poder traduzir.
Well, first of all, it's true that Brazilian clubs are, I mean, if you look at the last finals of the Libertadores Cup, it's Brazil against Brazil, against Brazil, against Brazil, and this is not good for the competition as a whole. And Mauro is saying that we need to work together to strengthen football as a whole and look at the ways we can bring others up to the same level of competition. And I mean, about the economy of the countries, that's outstanding. If we look at the GDP of the United States is higher than the whole Europe altogether. And then if we look at the markets we have in our continent, we have Canada, United States, Mexico, and Brazil. So when we have Brazil just isolated from these big markets up there, it doesn't make, I mean, it's not good for Brazil, and maybe it's not good for the rest as well. But I don't know. I mean, I have here the president of CONCACAF. You know better than us. What do you think about it?
No, listen, I mean, if you look at CONCACAF, we have the richest and the poorest country in the world. We have Haiti, unfortunately, and we have the U.S. Those are the realities of a confederation, and you have to work within those. And you have to remember there's different realities, but what you do for one, you must do for the other, knowing full well that others will probably get to a level that others can't. But also, there's some that are even aspirational. You know, I think in the end, I mean, football is not just about, you know, X's and O's. It's not just about revenue. It's also about your will and your political will, no different than the player. At the end of the day, he was a world-class player. He was a world champion, not just because of his ability, but because of his will to get where he needed to get. I also believe that from an administration standpoint, you have to have the will to get better. we've done that at CONCACAF when I walked in 6 years ago because of what had happened in my region with, some of the, you can watch it on Netflix if you want, by the way. Some of us that walked in the door, literally, we were bankrupt, not just fiscally bankrupt, we were morally bankrupt. So we had to fix a lot of things. And part of that was the will to do that, and the will to, doesn't matter what was in front of you. And I think that's part of it as well, right? And for us, for instance, in our region, even though the U.S. has the biggest GDP and all this kind of stuff, we're still at almost, I wouldn't say the infancy, but we're at the teenage phase of our sport. We're teenagers in North America in terms of our evolutionary scale. Part of that is will. I'm a firm believer that if the MLS, for instance, you mentioned the MLS earlier, if the MLS, and I think they're going to get there slowly, but has done tremendous growth in 25 years. I give credit to the owners and also the commissioner, Don Garber, who maybe is arguably pound for pound the best commissioner in sports in North America, because he's got a tough job to do to try to compete with the NFL, the NBA, NHL, and Major League Baseball. You don't have those issues in Europe, and you don't have those issues in South America. You're not competing with anybody because football is king. And so, but with us, if the MLS wakes up tomorrow and decides, has a political will to be the best league in the world with the 32 owners they have, it probably will be, because they do it in every other sport, in every other league. If you're a basketball player, a volleyball player, a golfer, a hockey player, whatever, there's only one place you want to go play, period. So part of that is a political will, right? And I see Brazil no different, quite frankly, right? Yes, there's other issues off the field, as Mauro has said. Can you imagine if you got that right? God, right? So part of that is you have to look at it internally. So, and so if you can get there, all right, I don't think there's anything that can stop, whether it be a country like the U.S. or be a country like Brazil. The good thing is you already have the product on the pitch.
You mentioned the will, and do you think that the fact that some owners of MLS clubs are the same of NFL and others is holding the MLS back somehow? Because if they have other clubs in other sports, do they privilege these other sports instead of MLS?
I think 20, maybe 15 years ago, I would say that statement probably was true, but in the last 10 years, no. I think if you look at most owners of sports, they have interest in everything. I mean, Christ, in Europe, you got guys that own 3 clubs in 3 different leagues. What's more important to you, Udinese or Watford? I don't know. Ask them, I guess. But that's the reality of the sport moving forward, right? Is equity players, equity groups that have pieces of clubs all over the world, that have pieces of clubs in different sports all over the world, not just in our football, but they could own the NBA team, they could own a, whatever, highlight team in Miami if those things exist. But so that, I think that's the reality. That's part of the globalization, is equity will find its way. It's not finding its way in football. The days of, one guy owning that club for 40 years and then passing it on to the family, those days are gone. And if you look at, I think next year is their 100-year anniversary of Juventus, that's been owned by one family. I think those days are gone. I think it's going to be equity players, multi-pronged ownership, and that's a reality, I think, moving forward.
Well, time flies when we are enjoying, so we are approaching the end. We are already 5 minutes late, so you want? One quick question, please. Good.
So I'm on my board of my local club in Milwaukee, right? Youth soccer organization, right? Local coach. We're looking at 26. Is there any plans for legacy in terms of how do you help grow the game at the youth level versus the MLS level? Is there a way that this could be the equivalent of what happened with MLS back in the 90s to really spur the growth of the game?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I think is great about a World Cup, especially when you're hosting it, but even just a World Cup in general, that's an unbelievable opportunity to really light what I call a pilot light in that young athlete. And that's happened a lot. In fact, I think historically both, and I'll use the US and Canada because we have very similar models in terms of participation and, pay to play kind of thing. The registration the year after a World Cup goes through the roof. I don't know if you see that at your club, but I know that overall that's what happens. And I think you hit on an important point. So the 94, the legacy was the MLS. I think as we move forward with 26, each country will have its own legacy. And it's going to be two-pronged. It's going to be, I think, U.S. Soccer will look at their own domestic legacy. And then also from us, from a FIFA standpoint, what we can give back to each jurisdiction in terms of legacy. And so there's different ideas floating around, but I think one of them would be to ensure that the grassroots is hooked onto that for sure at 100%. And how the best legacy is if you can get it, if you can get the discussion and the activation around the kitchen table at a family, I think you've done your job from a legacy standpoint. So that's the goal, whether it's in Milwaukee, Los Angeles, Vancouver, Atlanta, or in Guadalajara. I think that's a goal. So I think it's very important. I know U.S. Soccer has some plans, and I think as we move on to next year, you'll see some of that roll out.
Just to register, we have someone else from Milwaukee here.
Oh, okay, there you go. NBA champions, by the way. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Mauro.
With a Greek player, there you go. Talk about globalization.
Globalization,
right?
yeah. Mauro, any final remark? Tem algum recado aí para o pessoal? Para terminar?
Just thank you. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you and talk about the football industry. Thank you, Pedro.
Obrigado. Vitor, final remarks. What these professionals must do to improve football around the world?
Yeah, listen, I think, you have to, football is great. You have a lot of opportunities. But, as I tell my family at CONCACAF, my staff, and what I call my football family, I think at the end of the day, regardless of what area of the business you are in, whether you're in accounting or marketing or player development, that's outside there, the field, your philosophy has to be football first. If your decisions are not based on football first, then it's time to look for another job. That's the message. Thank you very much. We see you in the United States 2026. Thank you, guys.
Guys, we'll take a small break, like 5 minutes, so please stay seated. Okay, we're starting session 4, Commercial Partnerships in Sports in 2022 and Beyond. A qualified panel of senior professionals will discuss the current trends, challenges, opportunities for brands right holders. Moderating this session is Christina Vreesdorf, elected committee member, Partnership and Commercial Development Director, Unique Feed and Virtual Advertising.
Okay, thank you, Nada. Hello, everyone. If I can ask everyone to maybe stop talking, be quiet. Okay. So I am, let's talk commercial. Victor Montagliani was just saying, let's disregard money. I'm here to say, let's regard money. Can I get, guys, I'm sorry to interrupt everybody's conversation. Okay. Commercial partnerships. According to a recent sponsorship analysis done by Sport Business, FIFA has generated around $1.7 billion in sponsorship income during the last 4-year cycle, 2019 to 2022. So lots of money involved, and we're here to discuss what can be done, has been done, and will be done in order to create commercial win-win situations. And for me, it's an absolute true honor to welcome Patrick Nelly, who's widely acknowledged as the founding father of modern sports marketing and who's a pioneer of today's sports marketing and business industry. Patrick Nelly may have created the blueprint for much of modern sports marketing by laying the foundation of the biggest, most sustained corporate sponsorship program in the world between FIFA and Coca-Cola.
In Europe and in Americas, but not in Asia and Africa. So how could we promote the sport in many of these nations to which Coca-Cola were interested? So we developed skills programs, we developed competitions, the Kick Me program in the United States. So to build a partnership and a lasting partnership, and I think 47 years is a pretty good run for a lasting partnership, for relevance of the program, it needs creativity and needs to be well balanced between the partners, as it has been with the Coca-Cola company. My ownership in Coca-Cola and FIFA arriving in Argentina in 1978. And modestly, I thought, well, to provide a very good platform for Coca-Cola at the World Cup in Argentina, to where the answer was, oh, we don't know how we can do that. So Muggins here, as a very young man, was sent in 1976 after the military coup to negotiate with two generals, Viola and Videla, on my own, not even with anybody supporting me. I had to go and negotiate with the generals in Argentina. This was nothing to do with sport washing. This was saying to them, look, you were awarded the World Cup previously with the Perón government. You've now taken over this country. I'm a modest little Englishman here from a public relations background. Could we agree that you give me back all of the rights to what is going to go on at the World Cup in Argentina? Would you allow me to dictate who pours drinks in the stadium? I want to control all of the advertising of the stadium and bring in not only my client, Coca-Cola, but other big clients that could be benefited from it. And to my surprise, I wasn't shot. They agreed. And it was nothing to do with any other political reasons other than they knew it was important that the World Cup was presented in a very positive manner. So, partnerships. You have to be creative. You have to obviously come up with relevance and make it work for both sides, as it was then between Coca-Cola and FIFA. But of course, having then been successful with 16 teams in Argentina, we're now moving on to Spain in 1982. And of course, now everything's getting successful. Let's go from 16 to 24 teams. And so I'd like to introduce you to what was my next phase of partnerships. So can we run that first video?
Three years ago, Wes Nally launched the most persuasive new marketing idea of a decade. Inter-Soccer 4. 79 top international football matches, the best of world soccer. Shared by a group of major companies, all household names. A long-term program providing total worldwide product domination across all commercial rights. Up to 4 advertising boards for each company at every match. Repeating a constant identification to a total television audience of 8,000 million in 137 countries. Time to build an image that endures. Time to plan and market the world's greatest sports opportunity on a huge scale, bringing a new professionalism, not just to the chosen sport, but to the relationship of companies within that sport. What does it mean? At least 14 minutes fully on screen for each company in every match. The same exposure repeated in 70 or 100 countries. Sophisticated exploitation of soccer's motivating force, its ability to move products. A force which works its magic at every level, with dealers, distributors, customers and company personnel. Canon, one of the Intersoccer 4 companies, increased the sales of its A1 camera range in Europe by 70% during the summer of 1980, through football promotions linked to the European Championship. It reached a specialized target group, professional photographers, through its camera loan and repair services at major soccer events. The chance to experiment, to try a new lens. The companies are also learning to work together in promotions and worldwide publicity programs, using each other's products to sell their own.
Going from Argentina from 16 teams to 24 teams, I was obviously given the responsibility of how to extend my partnership program that was with Coca-Cola, and to then respond financially in a greater and significant way to support the World Cup in Spain in '82. And there I decided that I wouldn't follow the norm. I wouldn't follow what had happened previously. I would upgrade this to go exclusive. I came up with the idea of limiting just to a few companies of significant brands that would all collaborate together and work together in different ways, all exclusive in their product category. And therefore we created what is now true today. How many millions has it then resulted in? And I'm still completely unknown. I don't exist because for some apparent reason, others wish to claim credit. But that program, as you saw there, was us then taking it through to Mexico in '86. And the reason it's been successful is because it is exclusive, it is well planned, it is disciplined, it is relevant to the partners that become involved. The partners then collaborate with each other and it makes the success. And it was based on that success that you see that the IOC also followed suit. And again, not Mr. Peter Ubroth, that program was the program that was launched for the commercialization of the IOC and of the Olympics. So that's about creating solid partnerships. And if you see, many of the other sports have followed suit, and therefore the whole commercial partnership relationship works based on creativity and relevance. However, it's not just about football. Obviously, things are changing. The world is becoming digital. So I've had another challenge, which I'd just like to share with you because it's very relevant to sport and education. There's a word called poker. And if you use the word poker, everybody immediately thinks it's to do with gambling. And I was asked to see whether I would help create an international sports federation on poker, which I thought was ridiculous. Wouldn't be right for my image, even though I am obscure and hidden away. But I went to Harvard and I met a professor, Professor Charlie Nesson, who is the head of the law school in Harvard. Pedro was with me. And he approached me because he said that he ran an entity called the Global Poker Thinking Society. And he said that if you want to be taught law here in Harvard, you have to play poker. That there are many judges and lawyers that are brilliant poker players, but they don't want to make money on it. It's not about gambling. It's about their own social ability. It's about their risk assessment. It's about personality. It's about all of the educational aspects of poker. He actually took me to a school in New York to where they were using poker to teach maths, and the standard of these young kids being taught maths through poker was extraordinary. So I took on another challenge, and that challenge was to create an international federation of what we call match poker, because we've taken the randomness out of the game, made it digital, and therefore launched a whole new approach to the marketing of a sport called match poker. Let me share one other short video with you.
Win or lose, sink or swim, one thing is certain, we'll never give in. Side by side, hand in hand, we're all in together. Play the game, fight the fight, but what's the point on the beautiful night? On and on, hand in hand, we're all in together.
That obviously does require skill to play and adapt it in terms of its format to a sport, to create national federations, which we're now over 70, 75 nations, national competitions, teams of 6, all digital, because we're now in that digital world, no chips, no cards. But again, it shows that there is a need for a new approach as you start developing relationships and partnerships and being very responsive to this whole digital change, gamification, the communication with young people. Poker is very much part of universities, and I'm working on a major university championships. I'm looking forward because Qatar University have agreed to collaborate with us for next December. Well, not only will we be bringing a big university championship to university, but we will also be combining that with a sport and education conference, which was raised on one of the earlier panels this morning. We are all working together with universities, with the European Association of Sports Managers, with UNESCO, to actually have a strong annual conference to how sport and education should embrace, which is being developed through that initiative. So going forward to the future, again, I keep talking about creativity, relevance, and understanding. I have a whole new challenge as you do, and I'd like to again run one last little video just to start making you think about the metaverse, thinking about NFTs, thinking about cryptocurrency, thinking about all of the digital changes that are happening, that when you get into your discussions of your partnerships, you've now got to respond and reflect to a whole new way if you wish to develop those partnerships in a successful and a 47-year long-term environment. Event. It's about developing it into the total experience and extend it into a basis. But I've got other experts that are going to be joining me on the panel that are probably going to be able to comment on that greater than I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I'm very, very happy that you're not invisible anymore. And I'm also very excited that actually the FMA International Sports Conference is much more educational than certain Netflix documentaries that may have a little bit of Hollywood sparkle on it. So we'll go into questions later, but before, and also we'll discuss a lot of things that Patrick was just presenting. But let me introduce to you our other two panelists. David Tang, fellow FMA FIFA Master alumni from the class of 2003, who's working as the Senior Director of Sports and Entertainment Marketing for Adidas Greater China. Prior to Adidas, David worked for City Football Group as their Managing Director in China, and he also worked for over a decade at Nike China. Welcome, David. And moving from Asia over to North America, I'm pleased to present to you Jonathan Cantwell, FIFA Master of actually the same edition as David, who's the founder of and CEO of C11 Marketing, based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, United States. With I guess you're from Milwaukee, we heard earlier. With over 20 years of experiential agency experience, Jonathan's passion for the game has turned into a lifelong pursuit to create a dynamic, cutting-edge agency to support in the growth and development of the North American football, or rather soccer, market ahead of the World Cup, FIFA World Cup 2026. Welcome, Jonathan. So there was a lot to unpack and also discuss of what Patrick was presenting to us. There were two buzzwords or three buzzwords: relevance, creativity, and understanding. Maybe we go directly over to China, David. When you evaluate and activate commercial partnerships in Greater China, previously and in the future and the present, what do you look for, and what has proven to be most successful? And are you also already playing in the metaverse as shown in the last video?
Thank you. First of all, just want to say great to be here. It's not an easy trip to get up China, which is still in the lockdown situation, but it's even tougher to go back because when I go back, I still have to do 8 days quarantine in the hotel. In the past 3 years, I think for the rest of the world, you pretty much, the pandemic is sort of over, but we feel like we just started again, over again. So there's lots of frustration in the country. Just want to give you that background because that actually affected our industry, but also commercial partnership as well. Most of the sports events has been shut down. Whether it's continental, international events or domestic. So to your question, Christina, I mean, that basically challenged Vale's property. Before I joined Adidas recently, I worked for City Football Group in China, which is on the property side, basically trying to bring commercial partnership for the group. So Vale is on property side, on the brand side. You have to find a new innovative ways to actually, first of all, to see why I do sports partnership. And then eventually almost to justify the ROI to the senior management, what exactly return you're gonna get. So 3 points I just want to make. First of all, still the fundamental of sports partnership. You still have to address it. Which type of sports you choose, whether it's global, international, domestic, and then whether it's individual athletes, events, clubs, leagues, or major events like this, or small events in my hometown. There's a different choice. So that relevancy that in the past that you mentioned, I think is still valid. That's the fundamental of sports partnership, has no change. So meaning that each time when we evaluate a potential partnership, we have to go to the basic, the audience, whether the audience match with what we're looking for that sports, for that audience, for that country, for that continent. So not only for China, globally for Adidas, but also for my past employer Nike as well. Okay, so similar philosophy we can share. And the second is particularly in the past 3 years, given the pandemic, I think content is super important, particularly when physical gathering like this becoming super difficult. creating not only digital content, but also a content that actually can be spreaded through the digital platform, whether it's TikTok, or in China, there's different platform, Bilibili, Red, it's just upcoming all the time. It's super important. And that creativity in the content is super important as well. I give specific examples. So before I came, I was actually invited to be a judge for a partnership campaign award for China. And I see 20-something different campaigns among different companies. And then the final one that actually got the gold medal, the gold award, is actually a B2B company. It's a technology company, data-driven. It's not even consumer-driven. And then they actually did a Winter Olympic campaign, and very small budget, almost no budget, very small budget. The company is SAP, China. It's software, you know it, right? And it's not consumer-facing. They don't have a physical product to sell with the fans. So and then their campaign is very interesting. Basically, they put a group of data, because it's a data company, right? And they use the data, ask a very famous musician in China composed a melody, a music, and then actually have a content that a very famous piano player in China play the melody, and then with a short film video, and that content is spread all over the place in China, in TikTok, with a very small budget. And just to give example, creativity with a digital content can still drive your that funnel awareness, but also to connect with the audience. So that's the second, content creativity. And finally, before I pass over, is also if you talk about the future, I think whether it's metaverse or NFT and all the new development innovations, still fundamentally, I saw some statistics before I came by Nielsen Sports. They predict in 2025, and maybe this is the last year, 2025, among global partnership, global sports sponsorship, by geography, 25 to 30% of the sponsors, the spenders, will come in from China. I don't know whether that's true or not, but if you look at this World Cup, Vivo, Wanda, and other Chinese sponsors, I think pretty much represent that percentage. But I think that's a little bit aggressive in a sense before COVID. But I think just in the future of partnership, I think the Asian part of the countries and China will probably becoming more eager and keen for whether it's a big event like this or other properties, particularly after being isolated or almost shut down with the rest of the world for the past 3 years or maybe another 2 years. I think the Chinese companies are looking for opportunities to go outside to build their brand. So that's basically my 3 sort of key takeaways, content, creativity, and the future of globalization of partnership, particularly from certain countries like China, like Asia. So I'm just representing AFC here, and then share a couple of my point of views, okay?
Wonderful, thank you. Jonathan, you have a very, very big event coming up in the United States, Canada, and Mexico in 3.5 years. Do you also have contact with Chinese sponsors, or are you currently focusing with your team at C11 Marketing more on the local 3 country markets? What's your take on there? How do you prepare? How do you strategize?
So my visit to Qatar has been educational, to say the least. I've spent the last 3 weeks here. I came with more or less no agenda, but besides to listen, to engage with folks, and to get an understanding of their experiences here, where they plan on going over the next 4-year cycle, and to take that information and to take lots of data points from that and to figure out areas of opportunity and growth as we head towards 2026. The summary so far after 3 weeks has really been that people are looking at the North American World Cup as an area of opportunity. They're not only an area of opportunity for official partners, non-official partners, corporate, media, sustainability. I think that there's just an incredible excitement looking at the North American World Cup after this event. to really make dreams come true. And so for us, and referencing the metaverse and all sorts of new technologies in the States where we're based, but also have offices in Canada and Mexico, what we find is that in the agency world and servicing brands like Adidas and responding to briefs, what we find is that folks are looking for expert market knowledge. They're looking for experience and expertise and an extension of their teams. And so what we find is that we do one thing and we do one thing really well. And the world of sponsorship and activation is changing so fast and so frequently, we're unable to keep up with the metaverse and technology and what have you. And so instead, what you'll see is lots of different strategic partnerships of combining expertise across various different functions, some that's old, some that's new, and some that we haven't seen yet ahead of 2026. And we're there to keep an open mind and to service our clients and sponsors of large events such as this in the most creative and successful way possible.
Awesome, thank you. John, you mentioned earlier that you were obviously heavily involved in Argentina. When from Argentina, you had 16 to 24 teams participating. And now with the next FIFA World Cup coming up, we've got even more teams participating. I think 49, if I'm not mistaken, 48. Yeah, 48, yeah, of course. So I think that's confirmed in a way. Do you have any suggestions? What are your thoughts? What are your commercial ideas when you think about that? I'm sure you've got lots going on in your head, lots of ideas. Anything that you can share with us that we can maybe take forward, maybe even with you?
Well, in some ways, I don't feel it's necessarily the right thing to do, because in my language, it sort of debases the coinage in that it's probably getting too big, too much to take in, too much competition in a very intense period of time. But this is a personal opinion. 16 to 24 was very logical and very sensible and broadened it out. Taking it up again, I think as we've seen on the format here, it works and it works extremely well. I hope to be proven wrong, but my view is that you're debasing the coinage, you're taking it too far by making it too many, because the excitement of the build-up, the excitement of qualification is all an important part of the event itself. As I said, it's not just the 4 weeks of the event, it's the 4 years of the event and maximizing that exposure, that involvement, that attention over the 4-year period building up to the cup itself. And I think a lot of that early build-up and things will be distracted because there are so many teams going to, okay, you've got Mexico, Canada, and United States, massive countries. But yeah, it's a scale that I would be nervous of.
So it may dilute the emotional factor of it. And
yes, it may.
Yeah. Do you think that having more teams, more sponsors, now we've actually seen LED boards full of different sponsors compared to also previous World Cups. Do you think the commercial value is being diluted, or is there an end to the one-size-fits-all approach of sponsorship and it goes into more of a bespoke, targeted approach?
It goes totally against my original philosophy, which was less is more. Because if you go back pre-78 Argentina, it was a mess in terms of boards everywhere, signage everywhere, no controls, no discipline. My belief is less is more, because if you create too many sponsors, too many categories, everything gets diluted, and therefore it doesn't have the impact that it could have and should have. So that balance is a very fine balance. If you get that balance wrong, it goes the wrong way. Keep that balance right, then obviously things will work well for you.
Yeah, I fully agree with Patrick. I think particularly for the word less is more. I think that's almost like a philosophy for many corporate brand now. Particularly for our brand, we're sort of business also struggling, to be honest, in the past 3 years, particularly with the COVID in China. So the budget has been cut. And then, but also one thing that I just want to highlight as well, back to the fundamental of commercial partnership. If you look at that funnel, the consumer funnel in the top is about building brand awareness, attention, and then in the middle you're sort of engaging with the audience, with the fans. But in the end, you try to convert them into your customers. So that's what the fundamental of the commercial partnership when you evaluate it. And then these days, I noticed, most of the companies, in the last 5 years, from my last job at the CFG, I was actually met about 500 Chinese companies. Many of them are CEOs, decision makers, for my pitch. And then 95% of the time, I get rejected, saying, no, doesn't fit, we don't have budget, it doesn't really make sense, sorry, keep in touch, blah, blah, blah. But most of them is really focused on, where my commercial investment go down to the convert part. So I think that's a new trend I can see. Most of the brand decision makers are not looking at the top awareness, just logo on the LED anymore. It's more, particularly in the middle and in the bottom. How do we convert? So I think another keyword I want to share, which we use a lot in these days in our company, is activation. So if you don't activate the partnership, then you basically don't need to do the partnership. Yeah, I mean that's the slogan basically. And then if you spend, let's say, $3 million on the partnership, you probably need to spend at least equally to do something to activate the partners, right? So there's good examples, there's bad examples. I probably give a bad examples. One of our alumni, I don't know if some of you know Soto. Yeah, he's coming next week. He's just actually helped a Chinese company close a deal in the very last minute with this tournament. And this company paid a huge money to the Qatar organizing committee, but in the very last minute, and for 30 seconds LED exposure for every game, in 2 weeks 2 weeks before the tournament. In my opinion, it's good for Soto, he closed that deal. But I think if I'm the brand decisions, I will probably challenging. You don't have the time to plan. It's very last minute. Of course, it's World Cup, right? And then you got the eyeballs, but that's all you got. And then you don't have activations, you don't have the content, you don't have, the campaign. How does that money spent can connect with your business? If you really think about convert bottom part of the funnel. So maybe that's my personal opinion. Maybe you have a different agenda why they want to be it. But my point is, you need to be planned ahead of time, and to really think through that funnel and what exactly we got out of that partnership. I think that's basically the most important thing all the brand decisions looking now.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to see the return on investment analysis after that. But John, and I agree, less is more, but isn't it in a reality that nowadays it's really difficult to find funding as massive as you'd want as a rights holder? And when I look at your agency, you actually take a different approach. You don't think less is more, you say more is more in a way. Don't you agree?
I do agree. And to touch on what Patrick and Tang were just sharing, from our standpoint, in an area of our core areas of expertise is to ensure the delivery of partner assets. And just to show in the last 20 years in doing this, when we started, all we had to do was to make sure that the static fuel board was printed and upright and shown on television. And that evolved into LEDs that you see today. And now the new LED systems have multiple feeds associated with them, some that you can see, some that you can't see. And now there's virtual advertising. And so from our standpoint in working with properties and rights holders to try and ensure in a live event, live on television, that you're fulfilling all the sponsor requirements is very complicated and takes an incredible amount of strategy and work and teamwork to ensure that it's delivered. Again, back in the day, one person could sit there and make sure that the boards were all arranged in the proper order and the right lineage. And now it takes a team of people to be associated with all the different aspects of execution.
Yeah, I would argue that's part of innovation and actually, changing things. It's when you look at Extreme E, they trying to sell a race in the desert and in the Arctic, with electric cars, where everyone says, oh, it's impossible. Yeah, I agree. It takes a lot of strategy, a lot of human resources and work in order to deliver something like that. But it's part of the game, and without work, we can't also evolve in a way. I see we're running fast. Time's running fast. We're getting to the end of this panel. We'd be open to questions, of course.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jia from the 4th edition. I am also from China. So I have a question to Devi. I know China have facing lots of trouble for the COVID. For me personally, I living now in Spain, so I haven't been to China since 2017. So it's really a big difficult for every Chinese. But luckily I see a lot of branding here in Qatar in 2002, the World Cup. And you said a lot of story about this also. And my question is other way around. Because I think now for the 3 years, lots of foreign investors, they already lose the confidence to invest more in China. So I know you work for City and lots of other clubs also have offices in China. So I want to know what is the point of view for the future for the foreign investors in China.
So I think, first of all, China is still probably 1/5 of the world economy. I mean, this whole market is still so important, just like US market as well. So there's no doubt about it. And, China has to open up. The feeling that we've been locked inside for the last 3 years. You couldn't come to visit us. We couldn't get out. And then the trade, it was dismissing. Most of the many of my foreign expatriate friends in Shanghai left the country. So I think the sentiment is low. It's low, I have to say that. And then you couldn't even return to your home country at the moment. I think that physical distance, that physical barrier is so visible. And then there's little bit development. You probably see some news lately in China, some protests, there's some issues. I think in a sense, I want to back to the sports topic, right? I don't want to talk about politics. I think in that sense, sports become even more demanding by the people when there's no major investment, major sports happening in that big market. So every day you see people running on their own, even though there's no marathon, being approved to organize. So I think I still believe there's a big potential that almost being restricted for the past couple of years. And once it's actually open up opportunities, I'm optimistic on that. And then to your question, that the foreign investment definitely affected. And I think hopefully, when the policy relaxed, we can actually hosting major international tournament like this, particularly, which is one of my dream, to bring World Cup to my country to be the host. Next time in Asia, maybe after US, North America, US, Mexico, and Canada. Okay, and then that will be big. Okay, and because if you think about it, in this year, 2022, to this topic, the two biggest events happened in Asia. Tokyo Olympic in the early year 2021 is in a lockdown, half semi-lockdown situation. The Winter Olympics in Beijing, also empty stadium, no fans. So it's a pity the two major events were in the pandemic. And then the next time for Asia to host a big event like this, after Qatar, probably next 10 years, after Paris, after World Cup, and after Los Angeles Olympic as well. So hopefully 2034, maybe.
Thank you. We have another question.
Hello, my name is Ahmed. I'm from Egypt. First of all, it's a great pleasure to attend a panel discussion with such a great expert like you in the commercial partnership. Actually, I'm working in the company that holding the marketing rights, exclusive marketing rights for the Saudi Professional League, and I'm working in the rights delivery team. as we know, the Saudi League is one of the best when it comes to the marketing value between the Gulf or Middle East or Asia overall. But my question is, what is the best way to market something like the Saudi League when it comes to the local brands? It's 100% working well, but what is the best way to market the Saudi League and to attract some sponsored but international brands, not only local? Because as you know, most of the leagues in the Middle East and Asia and Africa, they can provide easily the local brands, but it's not easy to provide the international. So what is the best ways to attract some international brands? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Great question. First of all, I've been to Cairo before COVID as part of CIES duty to speak in one of the CIES network there. I got a similar question as well, and I think maybe we can connect after this discussion as well. My suggestion will be focus on what actually exactly you can deliver to the partners. So in my past word, I basically categorized 11 ways of activate your partnership, from very traditional, using the players to film the TVC, which is very traditional, existing for many years, to money cannot buy experience, you're hosting your client in the box, or to more creative, as I say, content, utilizing some of your rights. Or, I mean, there's a certain different, ways of activating the partnership. You need to categorize them in a way, and then see how that fit to your potential audience, to your potential brand and customers. Maybe they're looking into not really, consumer eyeballs. Maybe they want to engage their internal stakeholders. I'll give you examples of one of my clients that when I was at Man City, a Chinese companies, they are B2B company again as well. And then they did a partnership with Man City for big money. And they, every year before COVID, they bring 300 employees and all not employees, their best customers to come to Man City to do experience, hosting them. So that's one way to activate it, right? Another way is maybe using your rights to do employee type of. So there's different type of criteria. And once you categorize them and fit into the criteria, I think probably you have a better chance to be more convincing, storytelling, and then to the point. Just my recommendation. We can take offline to further discuss.
Let me just add to that. It's all about brand connecting. And basically, too many people go out trying to flog things without really thinking what they're taking out. You need to do an audit of what you have, what you are, what is your audience, how do people touch with you. It is all about that brand connection. And unless you get that brand connection right, you'll just be rejected, rejected, and rejected. So you have to put the work in, do that audit, understand what it is that you've got to communicate out, be creative, find some help. Plenty of people in this audience, I think, can help, but it is that connection. Can I just add one thing while I'm here? Being the mystery man, as it were, within FIFA, and we're talking about education, we're talking about the FIFA Masters alumni, to which I'm absolutely honored that you've allowed me to come and talk to you. I have a request. FIFA have been through a lot of difficulties. The FIFA brand is important to me, and I think the FIFA brand is important to you. And we hear about transparency, we talk about openness, we hear about putting things correct. Help me educate FIFA that they need to have a proper review of what is the history of their commercial development and not leave it hidden, because it is hidden for the wrong reasons. And those reasons no longer work at FIFA or exist at FIFA. So it's time that FIFA does its own educational study, its own, for your next generations and my grandchildren, who are obviously going to be part of that next generation, that there is a true, proper academic record of how this great sport has come to be the great sport that it is. And that name FIFA is important to me, as I'm sure it is to you. So please get the message across. It won't take a lot, a few academics. Let's get it recorded correctly, and then I can no longer be invisible. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think we have 3 more questions. We have to actually wrap up. So, Marcelo, please.
Hello, really nice panel. Nice to see you. I'm a FIFA Master Alumni from the 9th edition. My question is about the China as well, Chinese market. What's the impact of the limitations in terms of the digital, in terms of like from Meta Group or Google, the fact that the entire world somehow, almost the entire world is using this in the activation? How is this impact for China? Do you know all of this?
Seems quite a lot of interest in China. Great. So the China digital environment is quite unique. So the landscape is themselves has their own ecosystem. So of course, all the Western platform being blocked, but they will have their own sort of ecosystem. You know, the Chinese equivalent of Twitter, the Chinese equivalent of YouTube. So basically, you have to localize your content. I'm keep talking about content. You have to localize the way to be relevant to Chinese Gen Z consumers, right? So whether it's a platform called Red, you probably never heard about it, but it's super hot now in China, called Xiaohongshu Red, which basically KOL post, you know, their own content, and then most of the audience is about 200 million Red audience users, and then daily activity. Most of them are teenagers in China. That's the platform. You know, I just give you an example. Each platform has their uniqueness, so you just have to be, you know, super expert related, and then understand the environment. And then to the restriction limitation, there are certain categories on commercial partnership are disbanded, are disallowed. Crypto, for example, which is a big one, but there's a little bit gray area. Certain NFT companies still, you know, might do sponsorship or partnership in China or for that type of work. Betting not allowed. So there's certain no-go area in the market for sure. I mean, each country has different regulations for sure, but digital environment is very unique and diverse and super competitive and evolving super fast. Probably China is probably the fastest innovative way of in terms of mobile usage. I don't have my wallet since the last 5 years. I don't carry it because everything's on my mobile. Probably in certain countries that's still not the case, but in China that's already the case in the past 5 years. So you just have to adapt into that. Thank you, Marcelo. Good to see you.
So that works? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, my name is Martin Kasworm from the 14th edition from Austria. I'm a professor on the marketing of sports rights in Austria, aside from my job as a CEO in a sports marketing company. And I wanted to ask a specific question on the commercial aspect, since we have here now Europe, Asia, and North America sitting on the crypto market, the crypto industry. Because we have seen now with the Miami Heat selling a 20-year right deal with $100 and something million to FTX, and they went bankrupt. Then Crypto.com now investing in Formula One, heavily also in the World Cup here as a sponsor. I wanted to get your expert's opinion on how easily we're probably forgetting in opening up to new markets to sign those multi-million, billion-dollar deals, and how careful we should maybe in looking beyond now 2022 towards 26, towards opening up to those new industries. Thank you.
Don't know why I'm going first. There is a danger, I think, as you've seen with the legal implications of the recent collapse, that there are now legal actions being taken against some of the sports bodies and sports individuals that endorse those systems. Now, I've lived through tobacco sponsorship. I've lived through alcohol sponsorship. I'm terrified about sports betting sponsorship to where it may eventually go. But therefore, rights owners and rights holders really have to take that responsible role. And that's a challenge because money talks. As we've seen, doesn't money talk? I never realized how much money has an influence and impact on people. But the social responsibility, the legal responsibility sits with the rights holder and the rights owner. I would always suggest being more creative, looking at a different way, looking at a brand connection that doesn't perhaps take you into what could be potentially a very sensitive area. I think crypto will come out of it. Personally, I think there is no doubt the whole digital movement that crypto is going to be a very significant part of the future. It just takes time, but one needs to be cautious because you could get backfired and be involved in litigation if you accept sponsorship support and endorsement of a brand that then goes under and financially people are looking for their money back.
Just one thing to add. I think that the area, which there's many attorneys here, I think that the area of sports marketing law is going to be around for a long, long time. I think that what we saw as just a few examples in the United States of us missing out on 2018, their corporate partners would have never guessed that would have happened. That was very complicated for them, right? You'll see the reference to FTX and the Miami Heat. You'll see what unfolded here with Budweiser, right? You'll just see many, many and continued complications of deals that in a office prior to the deal getting done, of talking through all the potential what ifs that could possibly happen, good, bad, and ugly, and to figure out and try and strategize those. And so I think that the lawyers moving forward for these sorts of mega sports deals will be incredibly helpful and insightful to help guide brands in the right direction and the right deals.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Shogo Shodunke. I'm from Nigeria. I'm the CEO of Freestyle Sports Limited. I also finished from CIES in South Africa, Nelson Mandela Center in South Africa, Port Elizabeth. I think we always dwell much on activations, creating content, and marketing and the rest. I want us to look at the impact of influence and integrity in marketing. In Africa, sometimes when you don't have a relationship with people who are in a company, or you don't have access to the top guys who are there, you could have good content, you could have good proposals, but it may not fly. What is the impact of influence and relationship with people who are there in marketing?
Very good question. Actually, Adidas recently did a research engaging many countries, consumers. The project is called The Future of Sports. I think it's perfect tie into today's topic. There's 3 key findings I can share. One of them is related to your key question. The first, the future of sports in the next decade. The first one is actually sort of a joy in sports. Not just being the champion, being the winner, being us, being, fighting on the field. It's more the joy of sports. I think that's key, sort of key insight. And then that actually have meaning for us. And the second is actually enablement, to actually enable everyday people to participate in sport. I think that's the big trend. I think that's not the new future, but I think that's the key future. That's what I'm key message. And then particularly for your questions, I think to have not only have content, but also to have that inclusivity, to have a platform to enable people every day, whether it's in your country or in China or in certain area, to actually be part of that sports. It's important for our commercial brand and also for our commercial partners in a certain way of authentic, in the sense of being in sports and being connected with consumers every day. That's a real marketing rather than just creating a fancy advertising commercial content. I think that's my sort of takeaway. I don't know whether I answer your questions, but I just want to share that point. And then the third key finding, sorry, I can't remember what's the third key finding, but the second one actually inspired me. As a FIFA Master alumni, as being working in this industry for 20 years, selling sponsorship or partnership, sometimes we forgot we need to enable our kids, our neighbors, our people to be part of that sports movement every day, right? So I think that becoming super important for a company like Adidas as a strategy, as a mission, which is super important. I just want to share that.
Can I just add one other point to that? The art of securing commitment sponsorship partners really requires significant detail, and that I had to find out who were the decision makers in any company or in any entity. When I started with Coca-Cola, I had to find who was the person in Coca-Cola that could actually help us and would listen and would take that decision. That was probably one of the toughest elements, is to actually identify and find where the decision can be taken, who is that person, and then how do you access that person. I've had some interesting experiments in accessing key people. One of my biggest challenges was to access the CEO of AT&T in the United States when we put a concert on called Live Aid. And if we couldn't get AT&T to shift some satellites, Live Aid could never raise its funds and its money. What I managed to do through the office was to find out that the CEO had a teenage daughter. That teenage daughter was called by 3 of the biggest music stars in the world. And I assure you, AT&T moved those satellites.
Thank you for sharing that. I know there's much more questions. However, we don't have time. Nevertheless, Patrick, David, as well as Jonathan and myself, we're very curious to discuss with you. We're open. So there's going to be a 15-minute break before we actually dive into the next important topic for next year, 2024, which is women's football. But allow me to thank the 3 of you for being here, for coming to Doha, for being part of the FMA International Conference, and for sharing your expertise. I know we only scratched the surface, but yeah, happy to explore more and enable each other. Thank you very much.
Okay, guys. Now we're going to introduce the 5th session. We saved the best for last. This is about women's football and the growth of it. We'll talk about women's football in general with a focus on the upcoming FIFA Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. Moderating the session is FMA member Natalie Amato, partner executive director at El Once Media. Please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks of you who are still here. Thank you to all of you who are still here. Before we go and have our dinner and our party, we just wanted to close the day speaking about the women's game. I think women's football has been a term that's been thrown around a lot to win some brownie points in the football industry. But I think in the last 10 or so years, maybe even 15, we've seen some significant, real impactful changes, people taking the women's game seriously, stakeholders in all parts of the industry really putting an investment, restructuring how their institutions look at women's football. And with us today, we have 3 of those people who are making changes in 3 different regions across the world. In France, a couple of years ago, I think we saw some new records broken in attendance. We saw TV viewership higher than we have ever seen before. We saw the environment in France very similar to what we see in a male World Cup. Just people cheering. The competitiveness on the pitch was fantastic. And I think we can only expect to break those records next year in 2023 in Australia. So here to speak a little bit about what we can expect in Australia and New Zealand, we have Dave Beach, the CEO of the FIFA Women's World Cup 2023. Dave, it's not his first FIFA tournament. He was also the CEO of the U20 World Cup in New Zealand. And he also brings some expertise from other sports, some different sports, CEO of Triathlon New Zealand, an Ironman as well, so it brings a little bit of something, a little bit of edge to the panorama. And I'll leave the floor to him to give a little bit about what we can expect next year.
Netami nui kia koutou, I mihi ana ki ngā mana whenua. No tamiki makaurau aho, ko rangi toto ti maunga, ko ero ti awa, ko Dave Beach toku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So that was a welcome in the Te Reo, which is the indigenous language of Maori in New Zealand. And diversity and inclusion is obviously one of our core pillars of our tournament for 2023. And you can see there our First Nations acknowledgement that we start all our meetings and presentations with. I won't read it out today because we're going to be powering through this very quickly. But thanks for staying with me. I know this is the graveyard shift. You've had a long conference, so much appreciated for coming along. I'm going to try and make this as entertaining and powerful as possible and welcome your questions, because I understand in front of me we have the brains trust and the powerhouse of global football of the future. So looking forward to your questions and commitment to the game for the women's game. So what are we about? As you know, FIFA has made a bold and big commitment to the growth of the women's game, an investment of over $1 billion over 4 years in the current cycle. It is the biggest women's sporting event on the planet, and we look forward to showcasing the world's best female players, engaging audiences with exceptional storytelling and blazing a trail for women's empowerment. There's a lot in that. It's clearly more than just a tournament these days, and as Nelly touched on, the growth of the women's game has been just phenomenal in recent times. So I feel like the stars are aligning for this particular tournament in this particular window, both globally, but particularly in our region. We're seeing phenomenal growth, not just in women's football, but in the women's game more generally. Hopefully we're seeing the tail end of the pandemic so that the borders are open and we can certainly welcome the world back to enjoy the famous Australia and Aotearoa New Zealand welcome. So as Nelly touched on as well, 2019 was an inflection point in the women's game. I think it blew everyone away with the viewership, the audience, the attendance. So we have set ourselves some equally aspirational goals to continue the momentum of the women's game. So back then, 1.12 billion viewers and 1.1 million attendees. So we are going to take our tournament beyond greatness. And as the president recently announced at the draw, we are targeting a TV audience of 2 billion and 1.5 million attendees, which if we achieve will be a phenomenal benchmark for the continued growth of the women's game. It is going to be a tournament of firsts. As Patrick touched on, the men's game has grown over time, and as is the women's game. So growing from 24 teams to 32 this time. It's the first time it's going to be co-hosted across 2 countries, the first in the Southern Hemisphere, the first for 2 confederations. The list of firsts goes on, but those are the big ones. The road to this point in time has been a big one and has been really exciting, with nearly 500 qualification matches already being played. 7 matches actually remain, even though we've had the draw. So we have 29 teams qualified. But in a new thing, again, another first for this tournament, we have a final playoff tournament in Aotearoa, New Zealand in early February next year, where the final 3 teams will be selected. Apologies if I'm speaking fast, my Kiwi accent, so hopefully you can understand me. You got me? Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So just again, some of the comparisons back to the last iteration of this tournament. So it was 24, now 32. 9 host cities last time round. We've again got 9 host cities, but have 10 stadiums. And we have 64 matches. Tournament will take place between the 20th of July and 20th of August next year. I think one of the key challenges with this tournament, for those of you who understand a little bit about geography, it's going to be a winter tournament. So one of the key things we are putting a lot of thought into and mitigating. But if you're planning on coming down, pack your puffer vest and your beanie and you'll have a good time. Qualified teams so far, look, I'll give them time. I'm not going to run through all these, but from a hosting perspective, we couldn't have hoped for a better outcome in terms of the teams that we are going to welcome to Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand. You all would have seen the fantastic outcome from the Women's Euros recently held in the UK. Really excited to be hosting the Lionesses down under. They are going to bring a fantastic fan base with them, and we're looking forward to welcoming them. Put together with that, obviously, the USA will bring a fantastic audience, forecasting somewhere in the region of 20,000 supporters to be following that team down. They will be hosted in New Zealand during the group stage. I mentioned the playoff tournament running from 17 to 23 February. Those are the teams there that are playing. It's going to be a great teaser and warm-up towards the main event. Obviously, detailed match schedule there. We can distribute this afterwards. You can Google on the website, but you'll find the match schedule there. Some key points there. The match schedule will open with the opening ceremony and opening game in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, where the football Ferns will play Norway, and finish up at Stadium Australia, 82,000 people in that stadium, which will be a fantastic finale to what's going to be a great tournament. Kickoff times were an interesting thing to have to work through and navigate with that trade-off between wanting to make kickoff times that were appealing to a local audience so we could fill the stadiums and yet meet our broadcast requirements, given we're in quite a unique part of the world with our time zones. So quite a broad range. So some games are going to kick off as early as noon and 1 p.m. And the latest will be around 8:30 p.m. Quick touching on, I guess, the hosting of this tournament in Aotearoa, New Zealand and Australia. So key part of the marketing and promotion of this event is trying to use this tournament as a hook for people to use this as an excuse to come down for their bucket list holiday. We hope that with, again, the pandemic coming to an end, the government investment is certainly predicated in part, not just on the football legacy and the legacy that this tournament will leave from a sporting perspective, but obviously the direct economic impact of bringing in somewhere in the region of 50 to 60,000 visitors into the host countries. The hosting concept, so we are operating under a new model. So those of you who are sort of more interested in the commercial aspect of this tournament, typically with a tournament of this scale, a host association would set up a wholly owned subsidiary, a local organising committee or LOC, and that would be the delivery arm of the tournament. This is different. Another first, we are actually a wholly owned subsidiary of FIFA, which has actually changed the dynamic of the relationship between the key parties, between government, the host MA and FIFA. So that's been a really interesting path navigating that new structure, but all is going well given the commitment to the success of this tournament. Quickly touch on the stadiums. So in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we have Eden Park, actually the home of the All Blacks, really, for those of you familiar with rugby. 46,000 seat there, and then a covered stadium down in the deep south of New Zealand to help with that winter tournament, 28,000. Waikato Stadium, 25,000, and then Wellington Regional Stadium, 35,000. In Australia, Sydney Football Stadium, brand new completed stadium, only finished a few months ago. That's going to be a fantastic showpiece, 42,000. Stadium Australia, 82,000. That was the home of the Sydney Olympics in the year 2000. Melbourne, 30,000. Brisbane, 52. Perth, 20, and Adelaide, 15. So I think you can see from those capacities that there's a strong belief in the success and the attendance. But a lot of tickets to sell, a lot of bums on seats we've got to fill, but we're confident with the momentum already. And in fact, ticket sales so far have been going outstandingly well and exceeded everyone's expectations. So we're actually a long way towards achieving our ticket sales target already. Team-based camps, which we're actually announcing next week. Part of the strategy here is to spread the tournament beyond the host cities that have the stadiums. And so we're pleased that some teams have selected venues which are outside those host cities and therefore will get that national reach across both countries and encourage those people who have perhaps a team hosted in their town to come and travel to a few games. On the marketing side, as I've touched on, ticketing sales are going well. This is an opportunity not only to promote the game itself, but to promote women's football. And with the amount of interest from government, from commercial affiliates and others, already we know that this tournament in our region is going to take a massive leap forward in terms of awareness and profile. Touched on the fact we're targeting 1.5 million attendees. And there's just so much positive energy around women's football at the moment that the brands who we're working with already are talking about, to Patrick's in that previous section before around the activation and the storytelling around this. There's a lot of interest and there's going to be some really exciting content that gets developed around the edge of the tournament. And then obviously the last bit here is around helping boost the commercialisation of women's football. So, these the growth of a game and this inflection point sort of goes in step changes. So, what we saw in 2019 was a massive growth in participation, attendance and audience. And with that is coming an increase in the commercial interest in the game. And then so they'll continue to step change up as the game continues to grow. A little bit of fun here. One of our key marketing assets is the mascot, who we've called Tazuni. One of the unique challenges I kept getting asked, was our mascot going to be a combination between a Kiwi and a kangaroo? The answer was no. We're going to go for something a little more subtle, but we wanted something that was common between the two host countries. So we settled on something that lives in the Tasman Sea, a little penguin. And so we've called it Tazuni. Taz as in Tasman Sea, and Unity, Uni. So that's already grabbed the hearts and minds of a lot of the kids and other stakeholders in the industry. Upcoming milestones, there's a heap of them that are going to keep elevating the profile of this tournament. I mean, one of the unique challenges in our environment is while football enjoys a huge amount of participation, largest participation sport in Australia and New Zealand, it isn't our number one spectator sport, like it is in most, countries around the world. So in Aotearoa, New Zealand, rugby is our number one spectator sport, and in Australia, either depending on which camp you believe, but it's either AFL or rugby league. So this is a unique opportunity to help grow the profile of not just women's football, but football in general. And so that's obviously more than just the tournament itself. It's a long journey of milestones, announcement, and media coverage, and all this is part of that. So official ball launch, playoff tournament, FIFA Women's World Cup trophy tour, 100 days to go, base camp announcements, and that's just a smattering. So I don't know whether David from Adidas is still here, but we've got some really exciting plans. They're going to do something huge with the new ball launch. So that's going to be in Sydney in mid-January. So look out for that. That's going to be a pretty exciting part of the tournament. On the commercial side, again, sorry to keep calling you out, Patrick, but the simplicity with which the game used to have in its commercial structure, we're going in the other direction. But the good news is that for the first time ever, women's football has its own vertical. So sponsors who are interested in just the women's aspect of the game can invest accordingly. So there's still going to be a global range of sponsors that have rights to everything: Adidas, Coke, and Wanda. And our first two women's vertical partners, Visa and Xero, are signed up. So they have rights beyond just the tournament itself, but they go right across a whole lot of women's development programs within FIFA. And then we have tournament sponsors and supporters. So already, again, we've got a lot of brands in the pipeline, and it's going to be probably more complex than less in terms of how we deliver those rights. There's categories on categories, there's geographies, there's a whole lot of complexity and matrix around. So how this gets delivered is going to be a good challenge. But the good news is that women's football, as it commercializes, is ultimately going to benefit from a more bespoke and metrics type structure. Ticketing, our clear goal with the ticketing strategy is to maximize attendance. We're prioritizing attendance over revenue. And so we have gone with very affordable ticket pricing. It's a real balancing act between undervaluing your product and making it affordable so everyone who wants to come can come. Our ticket prices range from $20 at the entry point during the group stage for non-host country games, through to $120 for a Cat 1 ticket for the final. So very affordable, and we're certainly seeing, I think, the early benefit of that in terms of the take-up we've seen to date. Obviously, everything's going mobile on ticketing, and then in terms of the international market, we're not doing an official travel agent program, but do have a whole range of other ways that we can take to market this opportunity for groups coming in from offshore. Range of ticket sale phases. We've already had the official draw. We had the pre-sale before that. We had the Visa pre-sale period after that, and we're partway through the second phase. We go offline around March when all the seat allocations are done, and then go on sale for the last minute sales phase in April. I've touched on the sustainability side of things in terms of the Indigenous cultural element to the tournament. This is a core part of our strategy. So in another first, we have established a cultural advisory panel. So we have 3 strong female leaders from each of Australia and New Zealand, 3 from Te Ao Māori and 3 from First Nations Australians. And we've brought them together at the draw, and they have formed a very tight bond, and will be advising us on all things Indigenous culture as we walk through this. And we want to take it beyond just the usual opening ceremonies and that type of thing, and do this in a really authentic and in a way that helps advance the cause of both cultures. And then, as you expect, our sustainability initiatives go well beyond that. So into safeguarding, accessibility, tobacco-free event, anti-discrimination, climate action, and materials management. That is the potted summary very quickly, and I will now hand back to Natalie. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Dave. That was incredible. Just to join us up here and continue the conversation, I'm going to invite 2 of the most boss ladies that I know and women in the industry. We have Montserrat Jimenez. She's the Deputy Secretary General of CONMEBOL. Montserrat, she has been one of, if not the most important person within the Confederation, leading the new face of CONMEBOL. And has just reshaped the entire institution and given a platform for the women's game to grow in South America. And to complete the panel, we have Meskerem Goshime, a fellow FMA classmate of mine. She's the head of women's football at CAF, at the African Confederation, former deputy SG of the Ethiopian Football Federation, and probably the first person who I've ever seen talk so passionately about women's football, and kind of inspired me. Even though I'm a player, I just an inspiration in women's football. I think I'm going to go with a question for Dave, since just hot off the press. So you spoke a little bit about how in Australia and New Zealand you have other sports that are a bit more popular, and football, it tends to fall maybe 3rd or 4th in the ranking. With women, it's a little bit higher in the ranking. How do you think that the hosting the World Cup next year has already inspired or will inspire the female generations to participate? We spoke briefly about your 2 daughters. You have 2 young daughters who play football, and are perhaps a good case study to just speak about how this has inspired the generation, and what do you see?
Yeah, no, thanks. And look, I'm really passionate about the impact that these mega events can have on particularly youth, men or girls and boys. And I think if I look at New Zealand to start with, we have already seen the massive impact of these mega events. So we've just hosted the Women's Rugby World Cup, where all records were absolutely smashed. And I think the atmosphere in the stadium, so coming from New Zealand, you go to All Blacks tests quite frequently, and some of those games you can hear a pin drop, and they're a little bit quiet. We're a little bit of a conservative bunch from time to time. This game, the final of the Women's Rugby World Cup, was a sellout stadium in Eden Park. I mean, I think the previous biggest audience at the Women's Rugby World Cup had been 8,000 or something. This was 42,000. And the noise and the energy in that stadium was like nothing I'd ever experienced in New Zealand before. And I think this is the power now of the women's game. And that's largely because the audience was different. It was younger. It was obviously a lot gender different than the men's rugby. But it was just such a powerful lesson, I think, in the ongoing. And I think what we need to do is be ready, and the member federations need to be ready for the influx of demand that's going to come off the back of hosting these tournaments. Australia's the same. I mean, we've got a slightly different challenge in Australia, in that the football ferns in New Zealand are not a well-known entity, whereas in Australia, the Matildas are actually the most loved team of bar none in Australia by sort of brand measures. So different challenge there. And yeah, so it's pretty exciting, the impact it can have for getting people active and into the sport.
Yeah, and it's the first Women's World Cup that will be held in 2 different countries, 2 different confederations. And I think between them, although there's a lot of similarities in culture and just proximity, in the women's game, I think there's a bit of a disparity in just the level of the game, and perhaps how many players you have in each of the 2 countries. When I think about South America, it's kind of thinking like hosting the event in Argentina and Brazil. There's a completely different panorama of how developed the game is in each of those countries. So how do you manage like that disparity? Have you had to tailor a different strategy in one country or another? Just a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think we see this across the board in a lot of sports, particularly for girls, is that drop off at the age of sort of 14, 15, 16. So I think the key thing we're doing with this tournament is both the host member associations have had well-resourced and well-thought-out legacy plans in place for quite some time. So legacy has been at the forefront of the bidding and thinking for this tournament right from the outset. So there's already a whole lot of capacity building going in place. There's already, the infrastructure side of things. So the New Zealand government supported the legacy plan by committing $5 million to improving the changing rooms. Really simple stuff, but making them gender neutral. So it's those small things that can actually help open the doors to making it more appealing for people. So, add on top of that the capacity building and the leadership stuff across both countries with their legacy programs. So, I think that's the key part of it, is being on the front foot with thinking about legacy and making sure that when a young girl goes to a game, sees the next Megan Rapinoe, gets inspired, has an opportunity to take that next step into the sport. So I think that's a key part of it.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a difference between Australia and New Zealand and women's football, but I think we have 3 very different regions here. We have Oceania, South America, and Africa. I think we have like a very different reality in each of those 3. So it's interesting to hear just the difference between 2 countries that are next door. And now I'd like to hear maybe a little bit from Montserrat, who joins us from South America. So you joined CONMEBOL at a time when there was much change that was needed. There's a need to reshape the institution from its very roots. I'd like to hear where the women's football discussion lied when you were reshaping how the confederation should work in the future, and what has been implemented since then until now.
So, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank Pedro for inviting me of being here, and it's a great pleasure having all these women and of course you with us sharing this panel. Well, when we arrived to CONMEBOL 2016, we had a big problem on the table. I mean, it was not only FIFA Gate, but football was destroyed. And not only, well, when I speak about football, I speak about football in general, men's and women. But for South America, football is passion. Football is part of our life. We get born with a ball under our arms, and everyone in South America is so passionate about football that it was easy to work on men's football. But when we started seeing what we had for women's football, we saw we had nothing at all. No plans, no infrastructure, no teams, no professionalization. So what we decided to do is to put as a big pillar of this administration on working on women's football, but not only women's football, but women in football. So we started working on having professional women all over the stakeholders that we have in football, referees, match delegates, administration. In CONMEBOL, we are 50% of women working, and not because we have this part that is just reserved for women. we have 50% of women because they are the most capable in the market to do that work. So we started from zero, and we thought that women in football, in all the areas, was super important in order to evolve the game, men's and women. So we started working on how we can make women in football sustainable. So we had 3 pillars. We had more competitions, more education, and more opportunities. So these are the 3 parts where we are working. And when we speak about competitions, we are not only speaking about the professional competitions, Copa America, Copa Libertadores, Sudamericana, or under 20, etc. We are speaking about the roots. So we have many stories, as Linda Caicedo, that is coming to New Zealand from Colombia, that she came from our development department. She played on a club that came from her own neighborhood, and now she is participating in 2 years in 3 World Cups, because she's a very young player that participated in under 17, under 20, and she's going to New Zealand and Australia now. So we are really working on the whole platform to make the roots, our kids that would like to play football, that they are passionate about football. And if we do a little bit of history in Brazil, Paraguay, and all our countries, in 1960, it was prohibited for women to play football by law. So we are speaking that not many years ago, we were not admitted to play football. And now we are working on this whole platform where you can see that the football is evolving and that we are having hopefully 5 countries representing South America and Australia and New Zealand, because Paraguay and Chile are playing in the playoffs, and we have 3 qualified countries. So it's not only CONMEBOL, but also FIFA and the other confederations are really pulling or really working on women's football. But what's important is to see that we are gaining space in all the areas in football. We could see women being referees doing the Men's World Cup, and that's really history. And we are showing that there are no limits for women. So that's one of our biggest pillars in CONMEBOL.
You mentioned something that I just want to amplify here, and I think it's very important to understand our region. I say our because I'm from Uruguay. The cultural perception of women playing football, I think that, in addition to accessibility, infrastructure, having, grassroots leagues that a girl can play in, there's a very different cultural perception to women playing football in South America and perhaps in Australia or even in the United States. So I would like to ask how you've seen that shift in cultural perception in women playing football, and how that has helped, how that has prohibited, how it's posed a challenge for growing the women's game in South America.
I always speak about my own experience. I'm 41 years old, and if I told my mother I was playing football, I think she was going to die. So, and you went to schools, and it is very common in South America that during the recess you play football or basketball or handball, and you, like the football court, it was mainly for men. And if you wanted to play football, you should play with men. Today I have a daughter, she's 10 years old, she plays football at a national level, national tournaments. And in school, they have days that the football court are for women or for girls, and there are days that the court are for kids, for the boys. So I think that not only in Paraguay, but in whole South America now, the football court is not only for boys, or you should be like boyish to play football. Now it's very normal, girls going with their football ball under their arms and going to school and playing on recess and all these school games we have going around all over South America. And if we go to the Liga Evolución, that it's our development tournament, We started with 600 girls playing football, and now we have over 60,000 girls competing in order to go to our finals there. So we are growing in a very big way all around South America, and we are having girls from 10, 12, under 14, under 15, under 16, 17, 20. I mean, in all the categories, we are seeing that we are having more girls interested in football even than boys most of the time. If you compare how it's growing, women's football is growing much faster than boys. Maybe because all the boys always played football, because that's something that never changed. But now you can see in my house, in Paraguay, we have two teams, Olimpia and Cerro. Of course, I have twins. They are not from the same team. My girl is from Olimpia and my boy is from Cerro, and they keep watching football all day long and competing on who is the best. And each time they have free time, they are playing football outside my house. So I think that now it's very common. Even my mother, she goes and sees my girl playing football, and she's not. Of course, she's her grandchildren. You know that grandchildren do whatever they want with their grandmothers. But my mother goes and assists football, and it's very normal right now. And she's 10 and I'm 40. I mean, it's 30 years difference. You can see a lot of change in the mindset of all people around South America.
Yeah, that was crucial for any change, and I know that it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. Changing a perception of something, not everybody wants to, but I've definitely seen a change going to the beach in Uruguay. Maybe 15 years ago, I would play with my dad, and people would stop and watch us like, these girls play amazing. They're, what's going on? Let's talk about the style, perhaps, women's football players in South America have. So I think in men's, we have a very defined style. We have the jogo bonito, very artistic, beautiful style. And this year in the Copa America in Colombia, we saw a little bit of, some new styles and some new teams bringing something different to the pitch. Can you talk a little bit about how CONMEBOL is working with its federations and the clubs to sort of define the style for women's football in South America, and what is the style of women's football in South America?
Well, I'm not a coach and I'm not a professional on football, but what we see from one Copa America to another, and the difference we have between men's Copa America, that is each 4 years, we have Copa America for women each 2 years. So we can really make a track on how football is evolving, or women's football is evolving. And what we can see is that from 2 years from now, when we are having a technical guideline going on January, we can see that now women are evolving and they are finding their own style in the game. As we have the South American Jinga or the Brazilian Jinga, the Jogo Bonito, and everything, we are seeing that women, they are also having this own technique, and it's just not getting the ball and going directly to the goal. They are working a lot in the mid of the pitch. They are working a lot on techniques, and we can see that we have 10 member associations, and of course, in those 10 members, we have 3 types of women football, right? The countries that most invest: Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, and Paraguay. Chile, more or less, because they're having some problems there, but how they are finding a game, and you can see that they are leveling up. And the others that are not investing a lot in football, you see that we are still just trying to get to the goal, going on the other side. But I think that for the next Copa America, that hopefully will be 24, perhaps 25, we are working there. But we will see that, because we are working a lot with UEFA in order to invest in these other 5 member associations, because the difference that Pedro talked with Mauro Silva and with Victor Montagliani, that we are having in men's football, where Brazil is having a lot of money, investing a lot of money, and the other federations are getting not getting that much investment, is happening the same thing in women's football. But it's easier to catch up in women's football. That's a good thing of the involving of the game. So we would like to invest a lot in the other 5 member associations in order to get to the same level fast. And that's why we are working with UEFA and these other 5 federations. But yes, we are seeing that the game is evolving, that we are having techniques, and many of our players are playing in Europe right now, so they are also bringing the best things of Europe, but never losing the essence of South American football. That I think that it's what makes us so unique.
I hope we bring some surprises to the tournament next year. I know Brazil is going to be at the forefront, but Argentina is always a fun team to watch, and hopefully they bring the same crowd that they brought here to Qatar to sing for our girls. So I just want to move over to Meski to speak a little bit about the reality of women's football in Africa. So just as Montserrat was saying, that there's this disparity between some of the countries in South America. I know in Africa as well, we have somewhat of the same issue where some nations are way ahead of the others. Earlier, during the pandemic, I know CAF announced a new strategy where this was at the heart, balancing out the landscape across Africa. Can you share with us a little bit about what was involved in that strategy, and probably more interesting, what has been done already so far? Maybe some of the highlights around how you are trying to maybe close this gap between the nations in your confederation.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for Joao for inviting me here. So when we joined CAF in 2018, at the end of 2018, we faced the same problem because there was no information regarding women's football. There was no development plan for women's football. Women's football has been just competition that happens every 2 years. And that competition has been done the same format, the same way for 30 plus years. So it was a challenge for us, for me and my colleague, to find information in each country. And Africa is not just 10, we are 54. And it's a huge continent. It's not how it's seen in the map. It's actually very wide continent. To travel just in my country, Ethiopia, to travel from north to south, it will take you 3 days. So it's a very different landscape. So we need to find a solution that can minimize the gap we have in Africa. So in 2019, what we did was we went out to different countries. We spoke to the stakeholders. We used the African Cup of Nations, the Women's African Cup of Nations, which was held in Ghana, as a way to interact with the players and the coach, the referees, and find information and what they think should be done from their perspective to develop women's football. And by the end of 2019, we had a huge workshop where we have invited, with the support of FIFA, where we have invited the president of CAF up to player representative, referee representative, media, all of these aspects, so that we can develop the women's football strategy. So the strategy focuses on, literally, it's the minimum strategy that we can achieve, because like I said, just changing the narrative of African football, also changing how African women's football is seen, while making sure that we really can achieve that strategy. We really didn't want to go big. It's just the minimum strategy that we want to put down. So our strategy have 5 pillars. It's driven to the board strategy of FIFA, We have development, which focus on mostly on capacity building courses for the referees, for the coaches, while also focusing on giving chance for the young girl an opportunity to play. We have competition where we are trying to create more competition for our girls. We have marketing and promotion, which the new brand belongs to. We have leadership and professionalization, where we are focusing, bringing new women into the game so that we have more women administrators, also professionalizing the landscape, especially the club landscape of the women's football. And we have the social impact, where we use football as a tool to impact the girl child. So this is the strategy, and in each pillars we have been achieving some success. For example, in development, we have been conducting coaching education in all of our 54 member association, mostly giving importance to the member association which have less involvement in women's football. For example, if you see South Africa, you will find hundreds of A-licensed coaches in South Africa, women A-licensed coach. But if you go to Sao Tome, we don't even have any licensed coach. So we need to see which country needs the most need so that we can meet that need. So we, for example, in terms of coaching education, we will focus more on Sao Tome rather than South Africa because they are doing well. Also in development, we have introduced the school football program. It's just a development department that belongs to the school football program, and they have been creating school for girls, school football for girls, which is very important because in Africa we also have a problem of culture, and also plus to that religion, where girls are not allowed to play. I can tell you an example of in Somalia, there was girls were starting to play. However, they received death threats from organizations and they have to stop. So in Africa, it's not just culture, it's also religion. So we need to bring football into school so that the family and the girls can feel comfortable to play. So that's development. We have been doing that. This year right now, it's going on. Actually, we have zonal competition for school, and then they go to the continental championship. And we're making sure that when a member association register for the school program, they cannot register only for boys. It has to have a woman also, so that member association is benefiting for both boys and girls. In competition, we have created the Women's Champions League. That is really a baby of our department. We have been pushing for that. So for, like I said, for 13 plus years, we just have one competition for women, and it was 8 teams in the final. And really, we know that 5 of them we already know. So teams were not really interested to participate. But creating the second tier competition, which is a Club Champions League, also goes with professionalizing the women's game. And we have seen a massive improvement in terms of women's game, a massive investment, especially from clubs. Now men clubs are interested to invest in women's football. This year we have introduced also prize money for the club competition. Last year it was just just a competition without a prize money, but this year we introduced prize money so that teams can be more interested. In terms of marketing, we'll talk about the brand later. We have introduced a new women's football brand. What else? So we've been.
Well, you
doing
already
this.
answered all my questions, so let's just keep going. Go, go, go.
So we've been doing these initiatives the past 2 years. The pandemic was a bit, stress in our strategy to meet our goals, especially, but we didn't stop. What we did was we went into online education. So we focus on engaging our coaches and our referees through online courses. So we actually make sure that we are touching a very important point, which is our coaches know that women need to be trained as a woman, because a woman's body goes through a cycle every month. There is hormonal change. She gave birth. She will come back to football. So we have been quite interested in this topic, and we have had, with the help of FIFA, we have had a continuous education online for our national teams on this topic. Yeah.
That's actually something that Montserrat and I spoke about yesterday. Is like there's been this talk of equality in with the women's game, the men's game, and there's this fight for salary should be the same and everything should be the same, but there's this biological difference between just who we are and what our role is in society that it needs to be considered when we think about saying that everything needs to be the same, and how we train our female players, and just considering just the changes that our bodies go through every month. And I think that's something important to consider. And just hearing you speak about absolutely everything that needs to be done, is being done, and still needs to be done, it seems like you need an army of people working. Yeah. It seems like you need an army with you to just man all your member associations. So, congratulations on leading such a complex confederation. Like you said, 54 different realities, and trying to make a difference in each of them. Maybe just looking at next year, what can you expect of the African teams that are already qualified? Do you think we'll see any surprises? We have an African surprise here in Qatar with Morocco, which I'm sure you're very happy about. What can you expect from the African women's teams that will be in Australia and New Zealand?
Thank you. I think before going there, I want to really emphasize on this year being the women's year, the women's football year. I know that everyone watched the European Women's Cup, but I don't know if you have watched the African Women's Cup. It's been amazing. We had it in Morocco, and it has been a lot of records has been broken. We have in the finals, we have more than 50,000 spectators in the stadium. For each Morocco match, actually, we have had full stadium. It was really amazing. In terms of social engagement, it was incredible. In our all social platform, we have had 1.5 million engagement, new followers. So it's been really great. And I think the way we also invested in women's football and move it forward, especially we increased the number of final tournament teams from 8 to 12 for this season, which also had an impact in terms of engagement. We have 44 member association for the first time playing in the qualifier, so that we were just missing 10 countries. And in 2018, it was 25 countries. So it was a huge number of countries having women national team for the first time. So for next year, I think we're going to see a lot of surprises. We have Morocco, for example. They have been doing amazing in terms of women's football development and general in football development. I believe they will be in the surprise team. They play very well, and their first club is the champion of the this year's African Women's Club Champions League. So we expect big things from them. Of course, Nigeria is always the favorite. However, you can see that this year Nigeria didn't even finish in the first three, because women's football is developing, and we have a new champion now, South Africa. So South Africa, it's their second time to qualify for the World Cup, but we also hope they will surprise us. The other one is Zambia. Zambia plays very strong football. They depend on their very fast and very strong attackers. So these are the 4 teams, but also we have 2 teams playing in the playoff, Cameroon and Senegal. So we hope to have 6 teams in the final.
Thank you, Meski. So I think we're going to take some questions for any of our panelists. We have 2 right in the middle over there, or one from you.
Great panel. It could have been a woman there too, as the CEO. Anyway, welcome. My question is, in the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken, we have men and women playing together, so all mixed up. And I think there is a trend under 18 in England as well and in other countries. I'm bringing the Netherlands because we are all going to the Netherlands versus Argentina tomorrow. I think that is the ticket we have. But anyway, I'd like to ask, especially Montserrat, and you all, but what do you think about this trend of men and women playing together from the very beginning in the same pitch? Because it's not like the court for men and the court for women, all together. What do you think?
I think football it's not different from other sports. And it is very common then from under 12 in many, many sports. When I played basketball, until we were 12 years, we played together between men and women. And I think we both learn from each other when we do so. Because as Natalie said, we are different. We have different strength. We have different movements. Women think a lot. They don't have a lot of strength. Or they can, each time, it doesn't matter that we both have 175 meters and have the same kilos. Men are stronger than women because they have a different structure. But until 12, that is very equal. That's why in many sports, many sports, we play together until that age. And I think we both learn to take care of each other playing sports when we do so together. And we can learn a lot from on how men and women think about sports and how they how they develop. So I think we should keep doing that. We are working a lot with many coaches, women, men of under 12 in order to see if we will start working on having both girls and boys playing together, because we have a lot to learn from each other. But after 12 years, I think we should separate, because the development we have, it's very, very different. So we have to start separating in order to not have injuries going around in a nonsense way. Of course, I'm not a coach. I'm just speaking about the experience. I come from other sports than football. I'm the worst football player ever. I play everything that goes with the hands. So basketball, handball are my sports. But I think that if that's going on in every sport, football should not be different in any way.
Maybe I have a different opinion.
Oh.
Sorry. I think it all depends on performance. If a woman can be able to perform or be equal competitive in a men league, I don't think there is nothing stopping a woman to play in that league. In Africa, there is a trend where actually a national team from even in Ethiopia, when they prepare, they play with boys. We tell the boys, please don't be rough, but to make them strong as a preparation, they play with boys. Most of the girls, when we do interview with the players, most of the girls, they grow up playing with boys because there is no opportunity also to play with women. So it's a common thing. They are separated when they are 17 and above. But for our girls, especially in Africa, coming to professional football, they have been playing with boys mostly. So I believe it's competitive enough and can perform well. Why not?
I think we have a question back there.
Okay, good evening. Please to Madam from CAF. I can see you have done a lot for the coaches to educate them, for the administrators, but the main stakeholders who are the footballer. I want to know what you have done for them. Because one, it is not enough to create a platform for them, but we have to create a system that is working. And when they stop playing football, they will not become a burden on the society. out of 1 million footballers who came from Africa, about 2 or 3 are really doing well. If you want to talk about ex-internationals, you talk about George Weah, who is the president of Liberia. You talk about Samuel Eto'o, who is the Federation president in Cameroon. But we had a lot of players who started from Africa, who played in Europe, like Benjamin Wari from Zimbabwe, McCarthy, who just got a job with Manchester United, just few. Now the concept is, I believe we've seen a lot of problems in the men's football. And before we can go to the next level, we have to solve the problem we have seen in the men's football so that we will not go wrong in women's football in Africa. One, we have to do our factor analysis and see where the problem is and address it. One, we see administrators and coaches as different entities. And we see footballers as separate entities, forgetting that we are working for the same goal. And we need to work together. Football is applicable to our life. A striker cannot function without good midfielders. And there must be synergy. There must be transition from the back, from the goalkeeper to the attack before we can get the goals. No, we'll face a lot of obstacles because the function of a goalkeeper is to stop you from achieving your goals in life. It's bound to happen. Spectators are there to stop you from achieving your goals. Success is achieved through many trials, but we have to do things differently. One, women football, there's not too much money, but we have to encourage and empower the women who are into football. One, if they can't go to school, we can have a vocational center for the women. As you're playing football, it should be mandatory for them to learn 1 or 2 things. Because if you are destined to spend 100 years on heart, and you started playing professional football from the age of 18, and you played actively for 15 years, that means you stop playing at the age of 33, and you are destined to spend 100 years on heart. You are left with how many years? What are you going to do for the rest of your life? One, for us not to have the same problem we are having in men's football, playing abroad and coming back to become burden and parasite on us, we have to solve the problem. Because a man, we have stronger mind. If things are not working as expected, you can still manage. But women is difficult because if you don't have what to eat, you can do other things. We need to start from the grassroots, change the narrative, and encourage our people. Europe is more developed. Africa is underdeveloped, but there must be synergy. The purpose of sending people from Africa to FIFA Masters is to come back and see how we can develop our football. But because of the situation in Africa, some of them prefer to stay in here, which is good. But we have to come back and see how we can encourage our people. But from you, madam, we need to decentralize the activities of CAF. Get intelligent people to carry out researches. Africans, we assume that, see, this is the problem. No. We have to do factor analysis and do our researches and come up with statistics that will help us to go to the next level. Please, apart from educating coaches, educating administrators, have to invest a lot in the football. Thank you.
Thanks. Is there a question?
Yes, I said, what are they doing?
No, there was.
What are they doing?
Okay, yeah.
What are they doing to help the women
Thank you.
footballers?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I came back from the FIFA Master and I'm working in my continent. I never stayed in Europe, and most African did that. I think I would like to actually, if Hisham was here, I would like to name his name because he was the one who told me to go back in the continent, and he kept his term and he helped me develop to be what I am today. Anyway, in terms of the players are our center and most what we are focusing on. Everything we do is for the players. We educate coaches so that the players are trained with professional coaches, that people who knows the game, people who can develop their skill better. We train the administrators so that the players are administrated or are playing in a national team or in a club administration that knows how to administrate football. We are training the goalkeeper coach so that the goalkeeper is trained by a goalkeeper coach who knows how to train a goalkeeper, not a normal coach. And now we are doing a club licensing regulation. CAF is actually one of the 2 confederations to release its own women football separate regulation, where we are stating that clubs need to have the minimum criteria, need to meet minimum criteria so that players are the focus there, so that they are administrated well. And we are making sure that players have contracts, especially if you want to participate in the CAF Club Champions League. Clubs need to have contract, clubs need to have doctor, clubs need to have training site, clubs need to have stadiums. All of these criteria are there. Plus to that, now we are going to the main football, and we are making sure that any club who's participating in the main Champions League need to have a women's team. So we're making sure that our girls are taken care of. And from the next year, we want to do an education focused on players so that they have a good career when they finish their career. We have a lot of coaches who are former players, referees who are former players, women administrators who are former players. We just don't talk about them. They don't have the platform to speak. However, there is a progress of career change in women's football.
Thank you, Meski. We have time for maybe 2 more questions. So Pip here, 2 or 3, yeah.
Great, thanks. Bip Gautam, FIFA Master Alumni from the 7th edition. Recently, when Ronaldo made the record of scoring in multiple World Cups, there was a vocal, I don't know whether it was majority or minority, saying that Marta's record, similar record, should have also been celebrated as well. I'm curious to know, do you agree with that, or do you actually think that's counterproductive and that women's football should stand on its own and not be compared to men's football?
Football is football, and if we cannot not recognize Marta as the best player in the world. I'm sorry. She made the same goal. She won more World Cups, and she was the best player for many, many years. And why we shouldn't compare? It's not comparing Serena and Nadal. It's not comparing whoever other sports. I mean, football is football. It's not women's football and men's football. It's football. It's the same sport.
Thank you, Beb. We have one. Oh, sorry, he was first, and then.
Good evening, everyone. It's Muhammad from Sweden. I'm working with the Swedish Football Association as a project manager. We have a project called Reboot Football for Jobs. And my question is for Ms. Krim. I don't know if I pronounced the name right. I am originally from Egypt, and I feel pity for Africa and Egypt especially because the population there are almost 120 million people there. And I believe that we have a lot of talents. They can play very good football. But what I see now, it's big gap between Africa and Europe. For this project that I announced about, we receive 2 million euro every year. 2 million euro to help people in general, not only women, to get jobs in football. My question is for you. Why this is big gap between Africa and Europe in this fund? Because they get a fund from European Union. What is the problem? I think you are at like head of women football development at CAF. So if you contact CAF, if you make a contact with the FIFA, what's the problem to make kind of initiatives to help people to get more educated, to start from the beginning, not only to be a football player. It's not only about to be a football player. Everyone here, I believe, that loves football, but in his own way. Someone would like to be a referee, and other would like to be a football player or commentator or work in an organization or a media team. It's amazing to work in football and a good atmosphere. What I see there in Africa, we need to motivate them. We need to motivate the girls. It's only, if it's belong only to fun, to be like kind of fun or joy, I think no many girls will come to the playground or attend. But if they got a little bit of education, if they get some money, if you try to contact the FIFA Or my question is for you, what's the best way to get this kind of initiative? Thank you. I'm so sorry for being.
Thank you, Mohammed. Mohammed. So, you know, if you come from Egypt, you know the culture. And unfortunately, some member associations don't want to invest in women's football. It's a struggle that we have. We are pushing forward. We are always motivating them to engage. Right now, Egypt, for example, last year they hosted the first Women's Champions League. That's for us is a big thing, you know. I mean, we want to run, but there is always a stride to be made before you can run. So our focus is to make sure that there is a basic structure in each member association, which is that each member association have a women's football department. And we've been struggling to get one person in the Egyptian Football Federation to focus on that women's football department. Thank God we have it this year. So moving forward, we'll be engaging with this person to have projects. However, Egypt have a league, for example, maybe it's not seen, but it has been really running the past 13 years. So it's not like Egypt is behind, the continent is behind, we know, but it's how we can move forward. And how we can move forward is if we have someone in member association focusing on women's football and doing the women's football work. However, we also have to understand football is football. And a member association need to understand that the way they work in men's football, they need to work in women's football. In CAF, we have achieved something really peculiar, which is women's football is not another job. It's women's football is part of football. Whoever works in marketing need to work in marketing women's football. Whoever need to in communication, work in communication women's football. It was extra. So now it's how do I say it? It's taken by the organization as it's their own, or it's the organization's job. This is what we want to achieve in each member association. Women's football is not extra job, or women's football is not something you do when there is a competition, when there is something that happen. It's the job of the member association. Whatever they do for women's football, they need to do for whatever they do in men's football, they need to do for women's football. So we are working toward this integrating, let's say, women's football into each member association.
Thanks, Meski. We have one more question in the middle, and I'm sure they'll be around for a quick coffee maybe after for any other questions.
Thank you. My name is Ana Rincon. I'm Colombian, and I work with Major League Soccer in the U.S. My question is for Montserrat. First of all, is thank you for saying that you guys are working for women's football and also women in football. Same situation. I was playing until I was 12 years old. But when I started growing up, my mom saying either you kill one of those boys or they kill you. So you had to move to a different sport. And then when I left Colombia, I was just sharing my experience with another fellow Colombian here. I moved to the US, and sports is not a business in our countries. It's just like amateur. It's just like enjoy. And now that you are opening these opportunities for women to work in the industry, it's amazing. I'm so happy to see like women in the room, women speaking out. It's great. And then congratulations on the Women's World Cup in New Zealand. I know you beat Colombia for that bit, so bummer. But then with another joint bids, for example, we had Copa America in Colombia and Argentina. We didn't make it happen because of COVID. Are there any plans to present like a joint bid for a new Women's World Cup, maybe with like northern countries? I don't know, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela, and also now with the successful campaign of our U17 in the FIFA World Cup?
We always want to host football, always. Sadly, we lost. I think that Women's World Cup in Colombia was going to be a blast, because in our countries we feel football, and football is part of our blood. I mean, and you can see Brazil playing, Argentina playing, Colombia, or any side, we really feel football different. And you can see, and I'm sorry for the other teams, but if you come to a game, Argentina against anyone, you can feel what we feel when we see football. And that's the same thing that it's going with women's football. We are having the Finalissima Brazil against England. It will be played in Wembley. And in 3 days, we had 90% of the stadium sold. So that's the interest that football is having all around the world. And no one asked. And when we had the game Argentina against Italy, it was the same thing. So when we went out with the tickets and we had both sold out in 3 days, we can see how the football is leveling up in both continents and, of course, in the others also. But I can speak of what I know. But, of course, we love joint bids. We are going on a joint bid for a Men's World Cup 2030 with 4 countries. And, of course, we are coming back for a big revenge on women's football on the next years. And hopefully this time you can come to our continent and hopefully you can feel as it was in Brazil's World Cup, where you went out the streets and you could really feel football. So I think, and I will be in New Zealand and Australia, I know they are doing a great job and that it will be a great World Cup. But on my side, for me, it was going to be excellent if we had it at Colombia. But the revenge will be that we'll be the winners of this World Cup and on the Women's World Cup, for sure, both cups will come to South America.
Yes. I agree with everything Montserrat just said. And I'm just going to close off with Julian has a last question, comment.
Yes, hi. My name is Julian Smith. I'm the 19th edition FIFA Master, and I'm the president of the FMA. I have a slightly selfish question for Dave, and I think you'll quickly see where I'm going with this. But part of the traditions of hosting world gatherings is to, first of all, consult with our members and make sure that we get a good quorum of people who are willing to travel and attend to these kind of events. But in 2019, we had a world gathering in Lyon at the Women's World Cup there. And we had the CEO of this World Cup here in attendance with us today. So,
I think you're looking for an invitation.
if we were to organize our next World Gathering in Australia, New Zealand, first of all, would we be welcome? Have you enjoyed your experience today? And would you be there in attendance with us?
Yes, and I would love to welcome you all down. It's been an honor and a privilege to be on this panel today. It is an honor for actually as a man to be working on the Women's World Cup. 70% of my leadership team is female. 64% of our team is female. I live in a house full of females. Women make the best event organisers. I've been in the event game for 20 years, and the more the merrier from my point of view. So it is an honour and a privilege, and we would love to welcome you down to Australia and New Zealand in 2023.
Great. Thank you so much for the hospitality. I can't think of another response you would have given to the question, but but thanks for accepting us next year. We're all going to be there to witness the next big festival of women's football. So thank you, Dave, Montserrat, and Meski for your time today. I think it was a very fruitful discussion, and I hope, maybe you can connect with some of us afterwards, and we'll see each other around. Let's go Argentina, Brazil, and everyone.